Well, we are just getting ready to get started. So, thank you all for being on this session today. For those of you that may be new to these calls, this is our biweekly Eclipse info session, Lunch and Learn series. And we are very privileged today to have a special guest speaker. We're sort of continuing this theme of weather with our just last week, our roundtable meeting. Our guest presenter was Jay Anderson, who is a meteorologist out of Canada. This week, we're coming a little bit more local, and we're very lucky to have Paul Yura with us today. He is an Austin native with a background in meteorology from the University of Oklahoma, joined the National Weather Service back in 1992, and has worked as a meteorologist and forecaster in Oklahoma, Brownsville, Texas, here, out in South Carolina. And since 2002, he's been a warning coordination meteorologist working with Austin San Antonio National Weather Service since 2008. And what's perfect for our purposes, our needs in preparing our communities and our folks here in the Hill Country, his primary job is to be the liaison between the National Weather Service and local media, citizens, the county, state, federal agencies, and he conducts storm damage surveys as well and leads the community outreach program. So we are very fortunate to have him, expecting a lot of wonderful information, especially regarding weather on a much more local, regional basis. So I will let things head over to you, Paul. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. I know some of you on the call, some of you may have spoken to for the first time right now. But yeah, so the picture that you see there, that's our office in New Braunfels, Texas. So that's our new National Weather Service office with our Doppler radar here in the background. So what I want to do real quick is just kind of talk a little bit about the National Weather Service if you're not familiar with us, and then kind of get into the nitty gritty of kind of what we're planning and what we've been doing actually in support of the eclipse. It's kind of a new realm for us. We typically deal with weathery kind of stuff, and while the eclipse is not weather, everybody calls us about anything space because we're approachable that way. But yeah, we've been working a lot with the different counties, going to a lot of meetings, which I'll talk about, and just kind of ramping up for not only what we did kind of in the October eclipse, but then also what's happening in the April eclipse. So a little bit about us, the National Weather Service. We're a federal agency. We get our funding from the Department of Commerce. That goes to NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And that kind of funnels down to the National Weather Service. We are the federal government weather agency. There's some other agencies within the federal government that maybe get a little bit into weather, like the EPA or the Forest Services, that kind of idea. But for the most part, when it comes to public forecasting, the watches and warnings, that all comes from the National Weather Service. So that's our main mission, is protecting lives and property with general citizens like that. Now, on a national sort of scale, there were a lot of offices that were actually affected by the last total eclipse back in 2017, I believe, right? That basically came from the Pacific Northwest and crossed the middle part of the country. So we've actually reached out to a lot of our other offices, field offices, that dealt with that particular eclipse to kind of get some lessons learned. What can you expect and all this? And so that's obviously going to help us kind of prepare for our April event. You can kind of see us down here in what is labeled as the San Antonio region. We're technically the Austin San Antonio office. But all of our weather service offices are 24/7 operations, which is obviously very, very important when it comes to weather and tracking weather, because weather obviously never stops. Believe it or not, so right about a week ago, we were dealing with sub-freezing temperatures and ice. Last night, right across the hill country, we had ping pong to golf ball size hailfall. Kind of rare to kind of get that all in the same week, but that's kind of what's happened. So always have to kind of be on our toes with changing weather, especially this time of year. Each office is fairly small. We only have about 25 total employees that work here out of the National Weather Service office in New Braunfels, and that's pretty much the same for any office that you see here on the map. What is unique about Texas is that we have 13 offices that handle the 254 counties of Texas. You know, Texas is big. It's got a lot of space, a lot of counties. So we need a lot of offices to kind of handle that. So a little bit kind of zoomed in view. Where are we at New Braunfels really kind of watching closely? These are the 33 counties of our jurisdiction. So as you can see, the track of the total track totality that kind of comes through April 8th will transverse across basically from southwest to northeast across all of our hill country basically. starting on the river and then going all the way through the hill country and exiting into several other offices in Texas, the Dallas-Fort Worth, the Shreveport office, and then it'll go venture off into Arkansas and some other sort of areas out there. But my job is then particularly to kind of know partners in these 33 counties. That's kind of what I do. The forecasters here, the meteorologists that we have, they're producing the 7-day forecast out to 7 days in hourly increments. So those hourly increments are really important, especially come April 8th, because knowing exact temperatures and particularly cloud cover, which is always kind of a challenge. I'll talk about that here in a little bit, but that's going to be interesting to kind of see how accurate we can get a cloud forecast. Historically, that's nothing that we are, saying that, oh, we're awesome in doing cloud forecasting, because clouds are different levels and they come from west to east, east to west, and yeah, it's going to be a challenge to figure out if it's going to be cloudy or not on April 8th. This third area down here, decision support to emergency managers. There are a lot of emergency managers having meetings right now about the eclipse, preparedness, what to expect. And so we have been attending as many as we can to let them know that we will be here watching the weather. So if the weather, we are all hoping for great weather that week. Chances are somewhere in that preparation time week in April, it's not going to be good. That's just what climatology shows us. So we're going to be there trying to give them guidance as best we can. Part of that could actually be issuing the advisories or the weather watches or the weather warnings that we tend to do. This morning, we had to issue a severe thunderstorm warning out by Marble Falls and in that area and Horseshoe Bay that got the hail. Yesterday and the day before, we were issuing flash flood warnings and flood advisories of all the really good rains right along Interstate 35. We had upwards of 3 to 5 inches of rain that caused flooding and possibly even a few fatalities that we're still checking on. So this is kind of where we earn our pay, is to do all this advisory, watch and warning stuff. But in particularly, like I said, these hourly forecasts are going to be really, really important when it comes to April 8th. One thing that Texas is very unique of is billion-dollar weather disasters. We pretty much get everything here. And if you've lived here any long term, you kind of understand, yes, the hurricane hits, the big gigantic hailstorms, the big tornadoes, especially in North Texas, the winter storms, the drought, the heat, the wildfires, the freeze that cause massive infrastructure loss on broken water pipes and everything else. We're busy. We're busy a lot of the times of the year. And so that's what's kind of unique about this section of the United States in particularly too, are the unfortunate reality that people lose their lives to weather events. And particularly in Texas alone, you can kind of see how flooding kind of makes up a really, really big chunk of our fatalities. Nearly 1,000 people have died in Texas since 1990 from weather-related events. Yes, even hail. We've had one person die from a hail event. Tornadoes, cold and heat, lightning. And what's interesting about April 8th is that, you think, okay, well, we're not going to be dealing with any sort of cold. I'm going to kind of correct you on that if you're thinking that it can't be cold on April 8th. I'll share that for the very end. But yeah, I think our bigger danger is going to be severe weather possibilities or rainfall and what complications that could bring to people coming here and hunkering down in some sort of small town out in the hill country and what to possibly expect. With that sort of threat will bring lightning possibly. You have a lot of people outdoors during the eclipse. So obviously, I think if there's storms around, that's going to just add a whole other sort of danger zone, because most of our fatalities that happen in thunderstorms with lightning are where it's not actually raining. We get these bolts out of the blue, these bolts that hit in areas where it is not actually raining yet. So that could be a big danger. If there's a thunderstorm several miles away, but yet people are still outdoors trying to see the eclipse or the preparation of the eclipse at some of these festivals that are planned and everything else, that's going to be a danger possibly in April. Hailstorms. While we're hoping to not get a piece of hail this big, this is now the state record. This was in Hondo a couple of years ago, which is just west of San Antonio. That weighed over 6 inches. That weighed over a pound, but diameter was over 6 inches in diameter. But obviously, I mean, we got hail every month of the year. We can actually get hailstorms. That was proven by even this morning when we got hail out by the Highland Lakes. So that's going to be a danger. Flash flooding. We've dealt with some big sort of rain events over the history of this area, some devastating to the region. Every year we have some good rain events that at least produce some flash flooding that we typically lose a couple of folks from either homeless that are sleeping under the bridges in the urban areas, or the vehicles that get swept away at the low water crossings. This part of the country is very unique weather-wise. It is very unique topography-wise as well as soil type. And when you put all those three together, you get what we call flash flood alley. There is not a more prolific area in all of the country where you have the mix of urban, topography, and poor soil types when you get out into the hill country. What that means is that when you have rainfall that occurs out in the hill country, it runs off extremely fast. And it goes in then through our major metropolitan areas, through the cities and towns that have built their cities along these beautiful creeks and rivers. And so that adds to the big danger. And so we'll be pushing the message, turn around, don't drown a lot, especially if it looks like we are going to have rain during that weekend or upcoming into that weekend in April. But year round, we have to kind of talk about this message. And the big danger, especially when it comes to April 8th, is that if we do actually have folks driving around and we do have a lot of rain, even the previous week, we're going to have low water crossings that are maybe still flooded. There may be a problem trying to get into Google Maps to kind of see routes. And so we may have to have people that are just literally blindly just driving on roads. And before you know it, you could get to a flooded low water crossing. And if someone is antsy enough, they're going to cross that, and you could have some really bad results with cars getting swept off the road. It only takes 12 inches to 18 to 24 inches to sweep a car off the road with fast moving water at those low water crossings. So that's going to be something we're going to have to watch about. Anytime we have big time thunderstorms, we get things called microbursts and downbursts. These are big rain and wind events, and particularly wind events can be upwards of hurricane force winds, 60, 70, 80 mile per hour wind gusts for a short amount of time. But they can cause obviously a lot of danger, tree branches coming down, etc. So just severe thunderstorms in general are dangerous, but in particularly the microbursts and downbursts are something that will bring that. And of course, weak tornadoes. This is not truly what I would describe as a tornado alley, the hill country. We do get some tornadoes. Most of them tend to be these weak sort of tornadoes that are on the ground, very, very short distances and short timelines. You're talking about 1 or 2 minutes, and you're talking about travel distances of a mile or two. There can be some bigger ones. Historically, we've had some larger ones, but that's truly to the north. That'd be something more like if I would be doing this briefing in Dallas or in Shreveport, their chance of getting a dangerous tornado on April 8th are a lot higher than we are here. So I think still our biggest possibility of a disaster would be kind of coming from the rainfall perspective as opposed to a severe weather perspective. But we'll just kind of have to wait and see on that one. So what is our plan, the National Weather Service plan for support during this eclipse? We've already been doing this first bullet, attending monthly prep meetings. Bandera, Kerrville, Gillespie, Austin, Hayes, Williamson County, Burnett County, and I think we're Real County. So we just about hit all of them. And there's probably some more that we don't even know about that we're trying to hit. So we're going to be going to those as many as we can between now and April 8th. And there's going to be plenty of them. We're also going to provide daily weather forecast webinars starting 7 days out. So you're talking about right at the very, very end of March, the very beginning part of April. We are already going to be doing daily webinars that we're going to be opening up to emergency management partners and the media particularly to start briefing on what pattern it looks like we're going to have by April 8th, because that could be really important in letting people know before they even get here on maybe what to expect. If we're expecting a heat wave, then man, they need to be prepared for the heat, because we're going to have people coming from around the world that are not used to heat, and we can get some heat in April. And so that's going to be kind of really, really important. Here's an example of kind of the screenshot up here. We were doing these webinars actually for the I'll call it the minor eclipse in October, and I think they worked out pretty well. Got everybody kind of used to maybe seeing what we were going to be doing. Also provide weather support to our emergency managers the day of the event. So in a typical situation, we would love to actually deploy a couple of meteorologists out to emergency operations centers. Logistically, with how much traffic we think we're going to have, I don't think we're going to be able to actually do that. We're going to be better off being in New Braunfels with good communication and not having to rely on cell phone and everything else in order to give our support. So I think that's where we're kind of leaning toward right now. Provide detailed forecast, including probabilistic cloud cover forecasts. Okay, so we're used to just kind of doing, okay, it's going to be partly cloudy, clear, or mostly cloudy. Well, that's not going to be good enough for the eclipse people. They want to know what percentage of the sky is going to be forecast. cloud or not cloud. And so, yes, that type of data exists. And so we're going to have to teach a little bit about how to use it. Here's kind of an example of what we did in October. We were presenting percentages of reasonable worst case cloud cover. So basically, when the way modeling kind of works, there's a cloud forecast, but there's, kind of on a bell curve. Imagine there's some worst case scenarios and there's the most probable sort of way of thinking about things. We may be showing a lot of the worst case scenarios, so people aren't surprised that if it is cloudy, well, this was the worst case scenario, and I think this is probably maybe what's going to be happening. We'll probably give the official forecast too, obviously, but we're going to give some wiggle room so people have an understanding that, look, yeah, some clouds may be coming on this particular day or whatever. So I then want to kind of just talk about, so what are some of the worst case scenarios? Worst case scenarios for me are that either the rain shuts off in February and we don't get any good rains all the way through April 8th. That's going to present a fire danger for all those cars that are parking on the side of the road and everything that goes with vehicles. That could be really, really bad. The other opposite worst case scenario is that we have an incredibly wet end of the winter and springtime to where every creek is flowing and off the side of the road is kind of mushy and slushy, and so people are getting stuck, or it just takes one little thunderstorm the day of or the day before, the day after to flood a bunch of low water crossings, and people are trying to vacate the hill country at all costs, and we lose some lives due to low water crossings and visitors that are in their vehicles, kind of a thing. Those are kind of some of my worst case scenarios that I've already internally kind of thought about, and hope it doesn't get to that, but I think reality sets in and we realize that, yeah, those are all plausible sort of events. Also, severe weather coming in the afternoon of the 8th. People are trying to get out of the hill country. They're in cars, in traffic jams, and we have severe thunderstorms coming in from the west that produce hail and dangerous weather. Now, the good thing is that people are in their cars, and the safest place to be is in your cars, unless it's flooding. So I still think the flooding and the fire are kind of some of the worst cases there. I wanted to show this really quick because on our website, on our climate website, you can pull data for a particular day of the year. What I've done is I pulled Johnson City for April 8th. It goes all the way back. The screen doesn't show it, but this data went all the way back to the 1960s. So what you see is the high temperature, the low temperature, and the rainfall and snow that has fallen on April 8th every day, basically since the 1960s. What I wanted to point out was in 2007, the high temperature in Johnson City was 35 degrees. Low temperature was 32. They actually had some sleet in the hill country on April 8th in 2007. The year before that, it was 92 degrees on April 8th. So just 1 year difference, you had 92, and the next year was 35 degrees. So you need to be messaging out to your folks that are coming that literally they need to prepare for anything weather-wise, cold weather or really, really abnormally hot weather. Now, there's some averages. The average kind of is about 78, 80 degrees. The average low temperature is about 51. So yeah, and it has rained out of all those years back from the 1960s. It has rained about 20% of the days on April 8th. So yeah, 1 in 5 shot of basically getting rain, and you've got a shot of being near freezing, and you have a shot of near 90 degrees. So talking about a huge bell curve, right, with some outliers. That's what's kind of crazy about this. We do have a great website. The weather.gov/EWX website is our local National Weather Service website. Put your zip code in there, hit go, you get the forecast. You click anywhere on this map here, you get the 7-day forecast. And particularly one of the better websites is accessing the same data, but it's called Forecast Points. You put your cursor on the map and up will come hourly increments out to 7 days. So we're going to be pushing this website specifically the week of. So wherever you are in the hill country, you can basically click on there and get our official forecast in hourly increments. Obviously, April 8th is going to be the time, but even for those people arriving early. So I'm going to go ahead and make a PDF of this, Dawn, and send it to you. So in case people are interested about this website and some other things, they can go ahead and kind of ask, or at least you can share that to them.
That would be outstanding. We'll also link those websites on our resource page.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. this is, I think, more of the information that our folks really need to know. And yes, we all want it to be clear, temperate, not too hot, not too cold, but it's Texas. It's Texas. I mean, I've lived here long enough to experience, blue northerns that shift the weather 40 degrees in less than an
Yeah,
hour.
yeah.
So,
Oh, believe
um,
me, when I come to work, I want that kind of day every day. But
of course, of
somehow I just
course.
don't have the influence like I used to have, right?
Well, and I think this is also really important information, not just for folks that are, going to be flying in, but folks that are driving in, to understand and be able to predict and communicate weather, 'cause there's a large swath of Texas between, El Paso
Yeah.
area and the Hill Country. Does anyone have any questions or comments they would like to know or ask? Please go ahead and, unmute yourself, or you can put it in the chat if you'd like. I think I'll kind of kick things off with, you know, are there sort of a good maybe 5 bullet point sort of tips for folks? I'm trying to think of like how to allow folks the most amount of information on how to prepare for, the various types of situations, flooding, rain, thunderstorms, heat, without bombarding them with too much information.
Yeah, right. I mean, the one thing that's very unique. I mean, people should know what their heat tolerance is. I mean, I think
Hmm.
most people, even if you're coming from the Northeast, right? I think you kind of
Sure.
realize that if it gets hot. So, you know, I don't necessarily would harp on some of that sort of preparedness. The thing that's very unique here is the low water crossings
Hmm.
and the danger of
Yes.
water. That is something extremely unique to the hill country, and I think truly poses the highest danger for
Hmm.
visitors that just aren't aware of that. They probably
Absolutely.
get rain on the East Coast, they get rain on the West Coast, wherever they get, but they're not used to getting the intensity that we get
Hmm.
here, and then also the danger of the fast flow of what will
Yes.
happen if I try to drive through there because there's no other way, and I'm
Hmm.
stuck on this little back road trying to beat the traffic, and I get stuck.
Exactly. And
So
it's not a situation too where, if you're from, somewhere back east and, you get a little trapped in a water crossing, you can probably call for help, you
right,
know.
right. Now,
Multiple
one thing
incidents
we
like
also
that.
didn't have, years ago, but I was going to say that we have our cell phones now that we can access things like weather radar on your app and so. But here's going to be the problem: the
Yeah.
usability or the usable function of people's cell phones, which is a
Hmm.
very unknown at this point, right? No matter where they are, the cell phones may be unusable at times
Exactly.
or a lot of the time, especially if they're trying to make decisions of which way to go, avoid this weather storm, whatever it is. Um, to me, it's going to sound silly, but I would advocate you have one of those old-fashioned paper maps in your glove box,
Absolutely.
right? I
That's
mean, it
what
sounds
we're
crazy
recommending.
to think that we may be having to go backwards in time like that, but knowing already how spotty cell phone coverage is in the hill country anyway,
Mhm.
I can imagine that literally being, a possibility, or at least letting people know that um, they shouldn't be expected, and maybe it's best that they not just vacate right after, right? It may
Exactly.
be safer to just kind of stick around in a city, in a town where there's some
Hmm.
shelter, especially if there's bad weather approaching or whatever it kind of is. So being weather aware, having a good way of getting a weather forecast, um, having links like that especially before they get there, they can check the latest forecast and be somewhat prepared weather-wise, whether that be jackets or shorts or umbrellas, whatever. But I think just an overall weather awareness and weather situational awareness, I think, is what I'll be pushing the most. And it's not to say that they have to be going to our website, but they need to have a good, reliable sort of source. And unfortunately,
Absolutely.
sometimes those apps that you get on the phones, those free apps, are just accessing one weather model, and there's no human interaction with it. So of course, I would advocate obviously the local national, no matter where you're going to see this eclipse in the country, the local National Weather Service website to check the
Mhm.
local forecast, since we are local and we're the local experts with this, and we're not just a computer generated app that's spitting out some temperatures and rain chances.
The one thing that I know people will probably be relying very heavily on, because we definitely, our communities have been doing a great job about communicating, to their folks on their websites, come prepared, print off those paper maps, print off paper tickets to events, just in the off chance that we don't have cell service. But the one thing that most folks will have access to are radios, whether it's in their rental car, their vehicles, nearby businesses. So, is the National Weather Service working with local radio stations to maybe have more extensive weather updates and weather broadcasts?
No, but that's actually a really good idea. I'm going to write that down to maybe reach out to some, at least the local radio stations. Now, at least even from my perspective, gosh, I've been doing this for 30 years. The number of radio stations have dwindled to ones that are, local, I would say, right? That have, so I'll actually maybe contact, when I get to these county meetings, they would know which radio stations are, the local, especially the rural folks listen into.
Yeah.
And which ones are they going to be promoting on their local websites, right? Because I
Mhm.
think each county is pretty much coming up with okay, visitors that are coming, here's your stuff, to
Mhm.
maybe get with them and to make sure that they're getting their information. Because if they're spitting out some forecast information, I don't want them to just be using the app on the phone, right?
Exactly.
That's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. That may
Or
be an action item for me.
especially if we can provide, even the local, really, close in, neighborhood or community run radio stations, letting them
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
here's a good source to be pulling your data from, to be checking in on a regular
right,
basis. Because I know we do have a,
right.
a fair number of those in the whole country as well.
Right. Well, and then even make sure that somehow they get into the invite list for our daily webinars that we're going to be doing. So they are kind of aware of at least maybe what be the big danger, so they can either hype up the turnaround, don't drown slogans, or the heat,
Mhm.
or the cold,
Yeah.
or the
Well,
fire,
and
no
that's a
matter.
And you bring up a good point, as far as, like I said, our communities are doing a really great job communicating this information to folks. And in some cases, you were encouraging them to, print out a one pager of, here's where event sites are, here's where you can go for what type of medical services, here's what restaurants are open. And maybe there should be on there, in case of, severe heat, here are cooling facilities, here are, warming stations for severe
Yep.
cold. Here's, a good place to go if, you need to seek higher ground. So these are all things I think we need to be taking into consideration. Looks like
Absolutely.
Adrian here says, City of Burnett County is in the process of getting in touch with our local radio stations for information output. Fantastic, Adrian. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, Adrian, if you get a chance, if whenever you come across some contacts for those radio stations, please let me know, and I'll start to include them in some of the documentation. So that will be a part of this whole preparation, weather preparation, before the actual event.
Looks like Blake, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Paul, thank you. And this is Blake from Travis County. So,
Hey, Blake.
Paul, thank you for being here and giving this presentation. Really excellent. Do have a question. Last week we saw a really great presentation all about clouds and cloud cover and watching windy.com and so forth and so on. And I'm really curious, with your probabilistic forecast for cloud cover, do you anticipate that's going to be released for April 8th, about 5 days ahead of time? Or when is the sweet spot for really seeing the best forecast for what April 8th is going to look like?
Yeah, the sweet spot is the hour of.
I
Is
was gonna say
honestly, I mean, not the
12
joke,
noon, 15 minutes
but
before the eclipse starts.
it's usually it's literally using the satellite image and saying where the clouds are. Cloud forecasting is difficult, especially that time of year. That time of year in April, if you live here at all, you know that we have cloudy mornings literally every morning, because of the moisture that comes off the Gulf of Mexico. And what happens with those clouds? Well, typically kind of late morning, they kind of start burning off, and then by early afternoon, they're typically kind of gone. That's a very, very easily kind of a platform that we kind of usually go off of. There could be differences in that, yes, but that's the challenge, is that if let's say we're in a typical summertime, springtime sort of pattern like that, to where cloudy morning, it goes away, we're gonna have a lot of people panicking the morning of, when they wake up and it's all cloudy out. They may be already trying to vacate, right? Thinking we got to move because it's cloudy right now, not knowing that, well, just stick around for a couple of hours. It's probably going to go away. Um, So, right, the near term is the best, Blake. Now, is there any skill at all, 5 days out, 10 days out? The skill is more of the pattern that may be presented over us, not necessarily like where each individual cloud is going to be, right, or the levels of clouds. And so, right, these probabilistic clouds are going to be, if I do show them 7 days out, there's going to be a big asterisk on that, use with caution, kind of a thing. And then day by day by day, as we get closer and closer, we should be able to hopefully nail down a little bit more of not only the pattern of weather that's going to be affecting us, but then also maybe what kind of clouds that bring. So here's a really good example. We may be in that pattern where, yeah, there's no low level clouds, but the upper level winds are coming out of Mexico, and a lot of times that brings those high cirrus clouds, which are fair weather clouds. And usually nobody ever cares about those kind of clouds, except for if you want to look at an eclipse. Because the aviation community doesn't care about them. I don't care about them. It makes it 1 or 2 degrees cooler in the spring times. That's wonderful stuff. But the problem is, if it's thick enough, right, it's going to block out the eclipse also. So we're kind of the new territory here, where we're going to be trying to get that specific with different types of clouds, because that could really make or break whether or not people are able to actually view. So it's going to be challenging, Blake, but we're going to try to do our best. The only way we can do it is try. And leading up to that event, we may already be looking very heavily at these sort of forecasts like the month before, to even kind of see what kind of skill level these sort of models are producing for the springtime here, and if it's even usable, to be honest. But we'll try our best, and we'll kind of see what happens.
Sure. And so a follow-up question, and I forget his name, but the gentleman that was the presenter last week had mentioned, I believe, that NASA actually takes 2 satellite photographs a day, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And his comment was that the morning photograph isn't, I believe he said it's not released till the afternoon. So it would be after the eclipse occurs anyway. And I'm just curious, are you aware of any more live or real-time type resources that are available other than those NASA periodic photos, I
Yeah,
guess?
not knowing exactly what he was talking about, we have satellites that are 24/7. And even we have sometimes what we were actually going to be requesting. So we have some satellites that will give us literally images every 5 minutes.
Wow.
There's actually a way for the satellite folks that we have access to ask them to turn that to 1 minute imagery. So like we have that during the hurricanes. When a hurricane is hitting, we're getting 1 minute imagery that is 1 minute old. So that's what we're going to be striving for the day of. So if we're really trying to look to see who's cloudy and who's not and where those clouds are coming from, we're going to stop using the models at that point, and we're just going to use the live satellites that are literally a minute old. So I'm not sure what he was talking about, but yeah, cloud satellites or satellites that are taking images of clouds exist even at nighttime, because we're doing infrared, so we can still kind of see that. So that shouldn't be an issue getting images. The issue will be whether or not we'll be able to forecast before those images, are time zero.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Thanks, Paul.
Yep.
Any other questions? I guess I feel free to just unmute yourself to go ahead and ask, or you can put them into the chat here. As far as the past forecast data that you've pulled, I think one of the areas that's really going to be important, especially if we have cloud cover, is the wind. How fast are those clouds going to move out of the area? Is
True.
that something that you've got? I guess looking at your.
No, so as far as climatology, some of these stations that are out there, they don't take wind measurements.
Okay.
So like this one, particularly like in Johnson City, is just a high temperature of the day and a low temperature day and the precipitation. Now, some sensors, which are at the airports, so like at the Fredericksburg Airport, the Kerrville Airport, yes, we have climatology for wind speeds. Now, the difference is that those are wind speeds at the ground level. What you're kind of talking about is like that, the wind speed there at like 5,000 feet, where the clouds are going to be. And so there is there's archive data for that from the weather balloons that we launch every day, the closest one typically out by Del Rio, as well as just models. We do know that particularly in April, that is almost like right now in the fall and in the winter, is that winds move quickly
Mhm.
in the spring. They do. And so it's not uncommon to get 50+ mile per hour winds at like 5,000 feet. We actually call that
Oh.
a low level jet. And that's why sometimes if you do look in the morning in the hill country, those clouds are moving so fast. Yes, it's cloudy, but they're actually, you can see them screaming up above how fast
Mhm.
they're moving. And that is because, yes, they're 40 or 50 mile per hour winds pushing those clouds. It's pretty rare in April to get calm winds just because it's springtime and there's low pressure areas and there's cold fronts and, coming across the country. So it tends to be a pretty fast moving wind, sort of events and everything. So I think that's what we would kind of look for, especially in early April, would be to have that sort of, which is then again challenging. You may be clear right now, but what you got to be looking for are the clouds over Mexico, which in three
Exactly.
hours are going to be over you. So it's like, oh gosh, so it's
Mhm.
like I said, it's going to be challenging, and we're going to do our best, but it's going to be hard. It really will be.
Well, and that's something that we've been telling everybody from the get-go is we can plan as much as we want for these things. The two variables we really have no control over are the weather and the actual number of people that are coming in. And I think that in itself is a challenging issue. I myself was out in Mason and Llano County on April 8th of last year. And it was just like you said, it was hazy, it was cloudy in the morning, and by about 10:30, 11,
Oh,
it
really?
started to break up.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, this is good. This hopefully this is a
Yeah,
forward time of
yeah.
things to come. But being able to communicate that to folks coming in that when they wake up at 8, 9 o'clock the morning of the eclipse and they see clouds, they start freaking out, they want to pack up, they want to leave, they want to head further up the path of totality, which is just going to complicate transportation issues on the
Yeah.
roads and so forth. So yeah, a lot of details, a lot of variables, and challenging ways to communicate that.
No,
Oh,
exactly. Exactly.
Adrian is asking, oh, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
I went and
You
just put
got
in
that.
there for her. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'll get to my last. Yeah, I don't really. Oh, yeah, there you go. I have my email on there,
Excellent.
on the last slide there. Yeah, so it's
All
it's it's
right.
going to be interesting. I'll there's going to be a lot of sleepless nights, I think, coming up to April 8th for all of us. But yeah.
Well, and one thing that has kind of come out of preparation for this eclipse is realizing, you know, yes, we have some historical data from weather stations in the past, um, but this is going to be an important one with regards to, being conscientious of what the weather's been like in the days leading up on the day of the eclipse and how people reacted to it, so that we can hopefully help inform those in the future and inform ourselves better when, we have, future eclipse events throughout the country.
Right, right. And you kind of saw how what climatology has done so far, looking at cloud climatology and everything
Mhm.
else, right? People have realized that Texas is probably the most likely place to
Yes.
probably see the eclipse, in April, just because of
Mhm.
past climatology and how cloudy it is in the Northeast and the center part of the United States and everything else. So, um, yeah, it's not to say that it will be exact opposite, right? We could be the cloudy ones, and the Northeast could be beautiful for this event. And it's
Sure.
like, well, there you go. That's what weather is, and that's what climatology doesn't tell you, right? Is what it's going to be that particular year.
Well, and I think even getting a sense of what kinds of clouds we have in the sky that day is going to be important, because if there are clouds, are they thinner clouds? Are they lower clouds? Are they obstructing the sun completely? Or, even with the small sort of haziness in the sky, you'll still get to see the change in light. The nature will still be reacting the same way to the eclipse. You might just not be able to look at it, with your safety eyeglasses or with your telescope as clearly as if it were,
Right.
a cloudless
Yeah,
sky.
the only way that would really kind of happen in April is if, the day before or 2 days before we'd have a beautiful cold front, they would come through and make low humidity and everything else. We know that in April, we start to get pretty darn high humidity already, that moisture level, that haze, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that could be an issue too. One thing I didn't even think about until now, and I don't think I'm going to get this wrong. I'm trying to remember when the burn season is actually in Mexico, where
Mm.
they burn their crops and they burn their fields on the Yucatan. And we've had multiple years where we get smoke that comes all the way up from Mexico, with all the right wind patterns and everything else. Um, so we'll have to kind of even look at that to kind of see what that issue is. I think while
Yeah.
we're just kind of talking, I'm
I
going to
just
look at
pulled it
some
up
real quick.
actually, and it says the peak fire season typically begins mid-March and lasts around 14 weeks.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Now, like when I used to work in Brownsville, Texas, we had years where we had quarter-mile visibility in the middle of the day because of those sort of fires. But like I said, it all depends on weather pattern and wind pattern on whether or not that smoke actually comes all the way up into this region of Texas. But it's one of those, again, those plausible things we have no control over. But you could have the most beautiful kind of weather setup, but why is it so hazy? Well, it's so hazy because of this, right? And that could be one of those just complicating factors with things.
But we're going to have wonderfully clear, pristine
Yes, we are.
visibility.
We're going
I'm
to have a
just going
front
to keep,
come through 2
I'm
days
just going to
early. It's
keep
going to blow
sourcing
through.
that.
There's going to be no severe weather chance. The temperatures will be moderate, and it'll be fun.
It'll all kick in on April 9th.
Yeah, you heard it here first. Yeah.